The savanna stretched out in all directions, its dry grasses rustling softly in the heat as the man crouched by the baby elephant. The wind carried the dust through the air, but the land felt heavy, almost expectant, as if the world itself was waiting for something. The baby elephant's breaths were shallow, weak, and the weight of the moment felt impossible to bear. The young animal's frailty was evident in every movement, and the silence between each gasp seemed to stretch, magnifying the urgency of the situation. The man could see the animal's tiny body trembling with exhaustion, its dark eyes still wide with fear, a vulnerability that was both raw and heartbreaking. With one hand gently resting on the elephant's side, he moved slowly, examining its condition. The heat of the savanna pressed on him, but his focus was entirely on the baby elephant, whose body seemed to be giving up under the weight of whatever unseen injury had caused its collapse. The man's eyes scanned the landscape again, searching for any sign of the mother or other members of the herd. Nothing. The baby elephant was completely alone, isolated in its pain. His heart tightened as he realized how much more fragile the creature's survival became without its family. The baby elephant whimpered softly again, a faint cry that seemed to break the stillness of the savanna. It was a cry that stirred something deep in the man's chest, something that told him this was not just an animal in distress, but a young life in desperate need of help. There was no time to waste. He had to act, to find a way to relieve the young elephant's suffering, but how? The savanna was vast, the resources limited. The man knew that any hesitation could mean the difference between life and death. He took another slow breath, steadying his nerves. His training, his instincts, and the weight of the situation all converged in that moment. He gently placed both hands on the baby elephant, feeling the tension in its body, the heat radiating from its skin. He whispered again, his voice low, "It's okay, little one." There was no promise of magic, no certainty of success, only the deep connection forged between human and animal in the simplest, most quiet of moments. The young elephant shifted slightly under his touch, and for a second its body relaxed. The tension lessened, if only by a small measure, and the man allowed himself a moment of relief. But that relief was fleeting, overshadowed by the severity of the situation. He needed help, and he needed it fast. Every second that passed seemed to pull the baby elephant further into the edge of survival. He knew the next step would be crucial. It was too weak to stand, too vulnerable to fight its way out of this on its own. The man reached for his radio, his fingers shaking only slightly, despite the urgency of the moment. He spoke quietly but firmly into the device. "This is Ranger 12. I've found a baby elephant in distress, collapsed, alone. We need immediate assistance." His voice was steady, though the words carried the weight of a fear he had never fully known in his years of service. The response came quickly, a promise of help on the way. As he waited, his eyes never left the baby elephant, whose shallow breaths became just a bit steadier. The brief flicker of hope reminded him of the fragility of life in the wild. In the midst of a vast and often unforgiving landscape, a bond had been formed in a single moment. The man knew that whatever happened next, he had given this young creature the best chance he could. With the sounds of the savanna around him still muted, the man stayed by the baby elephant's side, holding on to the hope that help would arrive in time. The world, for just a moment, had stopped. And in that stillness, the connection between man and animal deepened, and the fight for survival began anew. The man stood still beside the baby elephant, his hand resting gently on its side, feeling the faint tremors of its tiny body. The young animal's shallow breaths had slowed, each one coming with effort, as if the weight of the situation was too much for it to bear. The savannah around them, once alive with the rustling of grasses and distant calls of wildlife, now seemed eerily quiet. The air was thick with a palpable tension, and the man could feel the gravity of the moment pressing down on him. The baby elephant, its body trembling with the remnants of the struggle, needed help. But help seemed impossibly far away. There were no roads, no vehicles, just the vast, open expanse of the wild. The rangers could not afford to waste time, and the man knew that they needed immediate assistance if there was any hope for the baby's survival. With steady hands, he reached into his pack and pulled out the radio. His fingers lingered for a moment on the buttons, hesitating, as if the weight of the call itself might carry the weight of its outcome. His voice, when it came, was calm but laced with urgency. "This is Ranger 12. I found a baby elephant in distress. It's collapsed, no signs of a herd nearby. The injury is severe and it's alone. We need help immediately. Over." His words felt heavy as they left him, the silence of the savannah pressing back. He waited, the radio crackling with nothing but the distant hum of static. Every passing second seemed to stretch into eternity. The urgency of the situation weighed on him, the stillness around them only amplifying the tension. His eyes never left the baby elephant, whose body seemed to sink further into the earth with each shallow breath. Its wide eyes were open now, scanning the savannah in confusion. The animal was aware of his presence, yet too weak to react, too exhausted to even move. The man remained at the cub's side, mindful of the fragile state of the young elephant. He moved cautiously, making sure his every gesture was slow and deliberate so as not to startle the animal. He gently stroked the baby's ear, his touch warm and soothing, though the comfort it brought was fleeting, like a fleeting breath of wind in the heat of the day. The elephant's body shifted, a soft grunt escaping as its tiny trunk reached forward, then collapsed back onto the ground, unable to rise. The man stayed with it, time stretching endlessly around them. His mind raced, trying to understand the cause of the baby's condition. What could have caused this sudden collapse? The baby's breathing had become labored, its eyes flickering with exhaustion, as though the energy to survive was slipping away. He couldn't be certain whether the cause was external, a hidden wound, or something deeper, but the fact remained that the elephant needed medical attention, and the only way to provide it was through outside help. Then, the radio crackled to life again. The response came, a faint relief washing over the man as he heard the voices of the other rangers confirming their movement toward the site. "We're on our way," they said. "Hold tight, Ranger 12. We'll be there soon." The words brought a brief surge of hope, the relief in his chest almost tangible. He took a deep breath and glanced back down at the baby elephant, whose body remained still, its breath shallow but steady. His voice, soft and steady, barely rose above a whisper. "Stay with me, little one. Help is on the way." His words held no magic, no promise of immediate salvation, but they were a reminder, a quiet tether between them in the midst of uncertainty. The baby elephant's body remained motionless, the only sign of life, its shallow breath, steady in its effort but fragile in its pace. The savannah around them seemed to pause, as if the entire world was holding its breath, waiting for the next moment to unfold. The man's heart beat in a slow, steady rhythm, a steady drum in the quiet expanse of the wild. Time stretched before him, each second more important than the last, a call to the universe for the strength to help this young creature survive. The distance between them and help seemed to widen with every minute, but the man held on to the hope that time had not yet run out. He wasn't sure how much time had passed when he finally heard the distant rumbling of the other rangers approaching. At first it was faint, barely a whisper over the vast landscape, but then it grew louder, more pronounced. The sound of their arrival brought a renewed sense of urgency, a promise that the baby elephant's fight was not yet over. The man watched, still by the cub's side, his heart lifting as the hope of survival began to feel a little more real. The sound of the rangers' vehicles grew louder, their engines rumbling across the savannah, each vibration echoing in the stillness of the moment. The man's heart lifted slightly, a glimmer of hope stirring as he glanced back at the baby elephant. It had not yet improved, its small body still weak and trembling, but it had not given up. There was no sign of slipping away, no sign that the struggle was over. Every second felt heavy now, each passing moment a fragile thread between life and death. The man stepped back, his gaze never leaving the young elephant as the first ranger arrived, followed closely by another. The vehicles kicked up clouds of dust as they came to a halt beside the collapsed animal. The lead ranger, a seasoned veteran whose years in the field had hardened him to the immediacy of such situations, jumped out of the vehicle and immediately assessed the scene. His eyes locked onto the baby elephant, scanning its fragile form with a practiced intensity. His face tightened with concern, the urgency in his movements clear, even as his voice remained steady. "What's the situation?" he asked, his tone calm yet filled with the need for clarity. The man quickly relayed the details, recounting the signs he had observed, the trembling, the signs of exhaustion, the vulnerable position of the animal. The rangers, their expressions set in determination, moved into action. They pulled out medical equipment, each of them moving quickly but methodically, their roles clear. Time was critical now, and they couldn't afford hesitation. Every second that passed was a battle to save the young elephant. The baby elephant's body twitched slightly as one of the rangers gently examined its leg, testing for signs of fractures or internal injury. The man stood a few feet away, watching intently, his chest tight with both concern and relief. The weight of responsibility was no longer solely his. The rangers had arrived, and with their expertise there was a chance, however fragile, to save this young life. Their calm, assured movements were a silent reassurance in a moment that had felt uncertain for too long. The ranger in charge spoke softly, his voice steady as he issued instructions. "We need to get some fluids into it. The dehydration is severe. Prepare the IV and let's clean those wounds properly. It's going to be a long recovery." The man nodded, stepping aside as they worked, the professionalism of the rangers easing the tension in his chest. The baby elephant was still frightened, its large eyes wide, its body jerking slightly with each touch, but it didn't pull away. There was a quiet understanding in its stillness, a kind of resigned trust that the hands around it were there to help, not to harm. Minutes passed in tense silence as the rangers worked together, moving fluidly and with careful precision. The baby elephant's breathing, once shallow and erratic, began to steady. Its small body, though still trembling, seemed to relax ever so slightly. The man exhaled deeply, the tightness in his chest slowly easing. It wasn't over yet. The battle was far from won, but this was a victory of sorts. The first steps had been taken, and with them a flicker of hope had returned. As the minutes stretched on, the baby elephant's body relaxed further, its tiny chest rising and falling with deeper, steadier breaths. The rangers stepped back, allowing a quiet moment to pass as they exchanged a few words, their expressions filled with cautious optimism. The air around them felt different now, as if the weight of the moment had shifted ever so slightly. Hope, though fragile, was tangible, like a quiet thread binding them all together in this shared effort to heal the animal. The man approached once more, this time slower, his steps deliberate. He bent down, placing his hand gently on the baby elephant's head. "You're going to make it," he whispered, though the words were as much for himself as they were for the young animal. The baby elephant blinked slowly, its large eyes locking with his for the briefest of moments. In that fleeting gaze, the man saw something shift, a glimmer of trust, a flicker of recognition that went beyond the pain. It was a small gesture, but it carried a weight of its own. The world around them felt different now, as if the savannah itself had exhaled with them, breathing in rhythm with the young elephant's recovery. The healing had begun. It was slow, uncertain, but there was now a promise of life in the air. The man stood there for a moment longer, watching the baby elephant, his heart full with a quiet understanding that this moment of healing was a rare and fragile gift,